Hi there, I'm Linda and this is Hutton's Valley Permaculture. My veggie patch build has been an ongoing project for about 4 years now. I have some sections of the garden producing amazing plants, while in other areas it's less spectacular. In today's video, we're going to have a look at the soil in different areas, how it compares and what impact that can have on growth of plants. A little while ago, I made a video looking at the soil in areas of my top swale that had been more managed compared with less managed. One of my viewers, Martina, suggested I do the same in my front garden, the home of my large vegetable patch. What a fantastic idea! This area of the garden that we looked at fairly recently is growing amazingly. All the plants just took off. I was a little bit worried that they might have received too much nitrogen and weren't going to give much in the way of produce, but that hasn't been the case. The plants got really big and now they're producing masses of fruits. My scarlet runner bean was the first to take off, and it's been a little hard to keep up with, so much so that a lot are just sort of potting up now, and I don't mind collecting lots of seeds from that. Also in this section of the garden, I planted some Ukrainian beans, so there's a couple of different sorts of beans happening in here, and that's just loaded with beans as well. You can see the echinacea produced lots of blooms, and I'll have to trim that back to get it sort of kicking in again, I think. Just below all of that, I've got sweet potato vines mingled with nasturtium and volunteer frilly leaf endive. Some of my fennel is flowering and will soon seed if I let it. Over the other side of this little path that you can't actually make out, I've got some echinacea. Now this is one of the ones that fell over. In one of my videos I spoke about it, and it is reshooting from the base, so I should be able to get lots of blooms from that. Moving through, this is my arch trellis that's got some young bean plants just starting to make their way up there, with a beautiful zinnia hiding in there. But moving through, it's a little hard to kind of move along this path. We've got the first of two super duper zucchini plants. Now this plant actually, I harvested 8 really big zucchinis off it in the one day, which was amazing. And likewise, right next to it is a Cocozelli zucchini, which is the striped variety zucchini, which hasn't quite got up to the 8 in a day status yet, but it still produces huge big stripy zucchinis. And of course this is our butter pumpkin plant that we saw recently, and also my lazy housewife beans that is really producing a lot of beans at the moment. Also in this garden I've got a couple of sunflowers. This one is quite large, but this one is absolutely huge. It hasn't quite bloomed yet, and will be looking amazing once it does. I can't reach the top. Just moving into another section of the garden, past another lovely sunflower, we have 2 more zucchini plants. And like in the other location, one is a Black Beauty zucchini and the other is the stripy Cocozelli. Now surrounding these plants, there's nothing really remarkable. We have a small volunteer curly leaf endive, a capsicum plant that was slowly sort of getting going, and various seeding plants left over from winter. Down the other side, it kind of looks much the same really. I've left some parsley to go to seed, which I should be clearing when I get this garden bed ready for more winter plantings. And there's still some chicory. Now those plants did get quite large, but they're finished off now. But there's nothing huge going on in this garden. Definitely not like the amazing garden over there. The 4 plants were planted at the same time and they all received the same amount of watering, just rain from the sky. So the size of the plants and how productive they are is really a result of the soil that they find themselves in. Today we're going to have a look at the soil in those 2 areas and in a number of different sites around the garden, and just see if we can see any differences. I've got my soil sampler here and I'm going to attempt to get in between these two huge zucchini plants and see if I can get some of the soil out. I'll try not to wreck these plants. We haven't had decent rain for a bit, so the soil is starting to dry out, so you just have to kind of wiggle this thing down and I'll see if I can get a decent amount out. Oh, I've got a small amount there. First glance, it's not a bad colour actually. The darker the colour, the more organic material in it. So let's go and get a sample from the other side. And once again, I'll just go in between these two plants. And we'll see what we've got. Now, at first glance, it doesn't look like there's a lot of difference. This is the sample that we just took out from the plants that aren't growing as big as the others. And this is the other side. So to me, the first sample that we took does look darker. Yeah, that's our first sample. And that's the second sample. A lot drier. You can see that there's really light pieces of soil in there. So I would suggest that the second sample has less organic material in it than the first sample. More organic material actually helps to hold water. Well, the first sample certainly looks better than the second sample. From this angle, you can really see the difference. What we might do now is actually sample a number of other areas in the garden, and we'll also take a sample from this lawn area that's had no compost, no mulch, nothing done to it other than mowing, just as a control sample. On the edge of the veggie patch is my asparagus bed, and it's got lots of strawberries and some lovely dahlias at the moment. Now, what I find is as soon as it starts to dry off and we get no rain, this garden is the first to dry out. So I'm going to take a sample from in here. The first one, the second one, and that's the third one in that garden that does dry out. So yeah, that's quite light. That still needs a lot of work in terms of mulching and compost on that garden bed to bring the organic content up. This area of the garden, I've got my cucumber plants, which are happy, although we've got some rodent damage there. But lots of big cucumbers coming, intermingled with flowering chicory and zinnias. That's my purple king bean that is sort of starting to dry off a little bit now. I'll have to get some more started. Some more zinnias, some basil, some large endive. They're all going pretty well. So this garden's not too bad. So we might take a sample here and just have a look at it. Now this soil sample, it seems damp and it's probably got good structure compared to that third sample. It's a lot darker. And is it as good as this one? No, I don't think it's as dark as that, but perhaps it's better than our second sample. So that one's looking pretty good and it is reflected in the growth of the plants. Now we'll have a look at the tomato patch and see what the soil's looking like there. Oh, a bit hard to pull out. Oh, there we come. Oh wow, that soil looks even better than the original. It's got lots of little roots coming in it. Well, let's have a look at that one. That one really compares well with our first. It's definitely better than the second, the third and the fourth samples. and it's got lots of roots in it. Now, it's certainly got more roots in it than our original sample, which was our big zucchini plants. Now, in this area, with all those roots in it, that's what's contributed to it being a really good soil. Organic material in the soil, as I said before, makes the soil hold water better. But when you've got organic material and plant roots, you get more soil life. The plant roots actually feed the soil by producing sugars that the bacteria and the yeasts and fungi live on. And in return, all of those microorganisms produce nutrients in a form that the plants can take up. So it's one thing to have lots of compost and mulch, which is what I think's contributed to my zucchini plants. But another way to go is not only have, a fair amount of compost and mulch, but also just really plant out your gardens. The last sample I'm going to take today is just right here, right in this area of lawn. And that's actually a really interesting colour. You can see that's kind of a richer brown, almost a caramelly kind of brown, whereas the worst soil from my strawberry bed is a really light colour. So that has quite good soil structure. I suppose being undisturbed for so long, it's got life in it and it's built structure in the soil, which also means it holds more moisture as well. This has probably been a little bit more disturbed with me planting, but yeah, the strawberry bed, I think I'd need to keep working with lots of compost on that. But that's quite an interesting result. I would have thought the lawn would have been the poorest soil, but it turns out that the strawberry bed and the zucchini bed aren't looking that great in comparison to the others. But you can see there's all sorts of different colours with the soil. It's kind of interesting. So while I really anticipated the zucchini soil to be the best, I think the tomato soil is the best. We've even got larger soil life in there. I did spot a little worm just before as well. So it's a really good sign that there's plenty of soil life and plenty of nutrients being cycled to my tomato plants. So having had a look at our soils, what conclusions do I have? What has contributed to those soils? Well, here in my tomato bed, I have completely done no dig. Right from the start, I just kept layering up sort of cardboard and compost and then mulch on top. Now, these have been my tomato beds for a few years now. And I think by just continuing to layer on all that compost, it is really building that soil and the organic material is increasing and increasing the soil life. So the plants are very happy in this area. So what about my really abundant garden? What's made that so much better than everywhere else when the soil is really second compared to my tomatoes? Well, the difference is actually my compost path. Right through the middle of this garden is a path that has virtually disappeared. Back in April in this area, I actually did a layered compost path. I just chopped the materials from the summer garden, put it in the path, and I put manure down and grass clippings, I think, all sorts of different organic material, and I put it quite deep. When I first started these garden beds, I didn't do no dig. What I did was dig out the turf and then put it onto the garden bed, and that created a really deep path in which I filled with wood chips to start with, and it actually made this garden bed fairly challenging to get under control in terms of the soil health. Each year since then, I've been moving out the decomposed wood chips and putting that onto the garden bed before renewing all the wood chips. But last year, after seeing a Hugh Richards video on making compost in your pathways, I thought that's a fantastic idea. It's right next to the garden and it will really help feed the future plants. And that's what's happened. Why I had been so worried about having too much nitrogen and these plants growing too much because of that was because of the compost path. So while the soil in this area is improving, as we saw with the results of the soil test, I think what's really contributed to all this growth is the presence of this compost path, the extra nutrients it's provided, and it's also been a moisture sink for these plants as well. Now, the difference between that area and the area with my zucchinis here is the amount of compost that I was able to fit into the path. Each of the paths I did build composts in, but because I'd already dug that out originally with the bed preparation to start with, it was a lot deeper and I was able to put a lot more of the compost in that pathway compared to everywhere else. And probably it's provided more nutrients and more moisture as a result of that. What I will be doing is continuing to build these paths up as high as I can and continuing to compost and mulch all my garden beds to see if I can improve the soil in each of these beds. This soil test has really highlighted areas in which I can do a little bit more work to build the soil up, but it's also highlighted different ways you can improve your soil. You can add your compost and mulch on top of it. Those compost paths might feed your plants in adjacent beds and also store moisture, which is not only good for the plants, it's also good for the soil as well. But another thing that we've learned is having lots of plants in a garden bed with all those roots feeding the soil life really helps all the nutrient cycling as well and is quite beneficial. I hope you've enjoyed the soil test today. It's been really interesting for me and a bit of an eye-opener as well. Thanks so much for watching and bye for now.